So now this is a video I wanted to do since long time, because I'm in a little on hold with my commission work, so I have the time to be a little more concentrated on my models, and this time I took a little time to build this gem made from DDP models. It's an Italian company by a friend, owned by a friend, Pierpaolo, and he made this very nice and interesting car that is the Ferrari 308 GTB Carma. Carma is an acronym that was coming from the name of the two creators of this vehicle. That was quite interesting. It was a Group 5 silhouette car, so we are in the 80s, early 80s, so 1982 and 1981, when all this type of huge modification, starting from ordinary sports car, were becoming more and more famous and used in serious racing, like this Silverstone 1981 was. This car is extremely interesting. As I said, the acronym Carma come from the shortest version of two names, Carlo and Martino, and they are indeed Carlo Facchetti and Martino Finotto, that were the two creators of this vehicle, which basically was a Ferrari 308 completely stripped down. As you can see, it's just you just can recognize the shape of the 308 just looking the A-pillar and the doors, basically, because all the other parts, I think they say that basically excluding the windshield, everything was completely converted and modified in this vehicle. It have been an absolutely interesting car, because this was the idea of two private drivers. Facchetti and Finotto were two very experienced drivers. Carlo Facchetti was from 1935, to have an idea of the age, so was already an adult pilot. Was over 40, was what they call it today a gentleman driver. At the time he was a serious driver, not a gentleman at all, probably a gentleman in ordinary life, but not considered like a gentleman driver. And they wanted to create this vehicle that, like all the Ferrari that are born without the official admission from Ferrari, they have issues and they have problems. But the car was incredible because it featured a twin turbo engine that was able to produce over 900 horsepower, and which was a power that in this year in 1981 was even more powerful than the K3 Porsche. That I build up a lot of Porsches, so I like a lot that type of model, but this vehicle was much more powerful and much more faster on tracks. Of course, being completely made by them, all the solutions were made by these two pilot, mechanical engineer. They were everything technician, basically. Also the way to find their own sponsor. This is Achille Motors. Achille Motors was a ultra famous car dealer, super car dealers of the 80s and 90s and early 2000 in Milano. Achille Motor had a showroom where you can dream, because he had on the showcase, I remember, Aston Martin, Ferrari F40, Porsche 959, everything I seen in Achille Motor was extremely nice. It was part of the story of Milano of the past, where you can simply go around in the night, and basically it is near a very, very dangerous area today with drug dealers and so on. It's really, really terrible condition for security in the city. But it was nice, because before going to a nightclub and so on, you can end in Achille Motors and look at the showcase and dream. I remember that I spent nearly, I don't know, many hours. So this is a very interesting car, because, as I said, it was basically a modification they made by their own. Remember that Carlo Facchetti was extremely famous to be a preparator, for Lancia Stratos, for Ferrari, for everything. Was extremely skilled of the old-fashioned way of make race cars. Really starting from the garage, and with all the experience that they made during the racing, during real racing. So this Carma Ferrari remained quite famous, because, of course, being something that was made basically from a private group of pilot, of course the reliability on the long distance was absolutely an issue for this model. Very often the huge power that was coming from the completely modified motor and mechanical of the car gave up, mostly in the gearbox. Was the issue of this vehicle. But I think this was absolutely something that have to be a masterpiece in the creation of this type of model. And thanks God we have this DDP model that is creating a lot of interesting car from this era. You know, sometimes we chat a little with Pier Paolo, very kindly guy. You know, in a huge world of kids that pretend to be someone in modeling and so on. Pier Paolo instead is a gentleman, and he's really making his modeling in his way with his line, which I personally like it a lot. You know, I really like the person. You know, and the model is extremely well done. Let's have a look. You know. He gave me a lot of tips also about my production, so I have to admit it, if I can produce something in resin, is also because this guy helped me in finding the contact and the resource to keep on and be able to produce the casting. The casting is made in the same facility where I do my casting, so it is made by the same guy, you know. And inside this box, constantly this I badly respect when somebody do a model like this. As I said, in the land of chatting people and blah 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 people, we are so big, we do this, we do 3D, we do this and we do that. So simply dumb bass that don't know a shit about modeling, and they neither do modeling. So this guy indeed make his own models. So all the models that you will see on the box art of his productions is made by him. So this is a model that he made, finished production. It is a philosophy that I completely agree with, because it show up that the model will be finished in a professional way and very nice finishing. You know, I nearly never do that ugly glossy finishing that some dickhead pretend to be so skilled to make cars from the 70s, the 80s and the 90s completely glossy, like if they are candies coming from the goodies shop. So it's really, so I save it. This person I absolutely save. And inside this model, you know, you have this very interesting detail extra, which is the transparent part that are made in acetate with the printing over about the ceiling on the windshield, as well as the decal that are professionally printed, you know, very good quality, and a very nice detail set in photo edge, you know, featuring the frames of the windows and the extractor, the rear extractor of the car, you know, with all this other detail that are absolutely lovely on this vehicle. You know, I think it's just missing, but that is probably also my mistake, that sometimes I get I do mistake because I follow the refurbished cars and so on. About this car, I think that been produced 2 or 3 cars in total, you know, which the first one was the rear racer, and the other 2 are being made with the spare part that Facetti and Finotto produced during that year. So they were able to close 2 other vehicles that have been sold, and they are the one that you see today racing. You know, they are slightly enlarged on this side. They probably have bigger intercooler. I think all this side in the rear vehicle was made in fiberglass. You know, this was the era, the 80s, long ago, before the carbon fiber parts, and everything was fiberglass and wood and metal or aluminium, you know. So that's it. This is a very nice metal detail, which you can decide to use it or not. Of course, also produce and they give you the buckles to finish the model, and all the lock that can be placed over the body. Very interesting, you know, simple parts, simple details, but very well done. This is a vacuum formed part for the front end of the front lights, plus the 2 front lights to be placed inside that spot down there. And let's see what I've done until now. You know, on my channel you will find also a review that I already made back in time about this Carma 308, which was extremely interesting. You know, was a model that I paid in some way as an exchange with my models, you know, because some of the vehicles that I do also Paolo like, so we made an exchange in models, you know. And I chose this one because I really like the idea of this type of vehicle. You know, in the history of Italian motorsport and in the history of special Ferraris, this is an extremely special Ferrari with an extreme special history. You know, also looking at the skill that the drivers had driving this beast around the tracks, you know, in that years. You know, remember the 80s were the years where Porsche arrived with the before the 936, then the 935/78. So it was that type of cars arriving, but it was of course the Porsche main factory that concentrated herself on this type of vehicle, because Ferrari was mostly concentrated in the 80s, you remember, mostly and only in Formula 1. This, as well as the Ferrari 333 SP, have been the neglected kids from Ferrari, which Ferrari never wanted to give them specific assistance in develop a vehicle that will be able to win in those categories, simply because in that years there was no interest at all for the Ferrari to participate in this type of model. They have the 512 BB of the same years, winning car, of course, but much bigger project, starting indeed from the smaller 308. 308 was the small Ferrari of the time, what you can have back in time with the 296 GT3. Instead you go for 512 BB, was something that if you take already the big Ferrari Roma and so on, so the big Ferrari, the big ones, not the small one in the Ferrari catalog, and she was deadly fast, as I said. Inside the model, you have a bunch of parts which I already cleaned in some parts, not completely done. This is the rear wheel, which is shared basically in the same size from identical 935 or 936, so the width of the tire is absolutely big in the same way. And this is the lower back to close. Of course, you have to add some minor details on the part that is visible of the mechanical. Basically was the part of the turbo that remained visible in the back. He also had a 3D part, because I think that I seen when he was developing this model that he started from a 3D mold, which is the best way to use 3D today, because then you have a quite good body, which as a model you can detail by your own and take away all the lines of the 3D, the ugly lines that really often remain on the 3D mold, and provide to the modeler an already finished reworked body by the modeler. So it's already the big work he already did to produce this type of body. And inside here you will have, as we say, the base, the four wheels. I want to check the size of the front wheel, because I was a little bit worried from the height of the model. From casting problem, I had to add a little 1mm side on the side skirt there. And this is part of the interior, this is part of the cockpit. You of course will have a quite standard seat coming. I think it's the same identical one from Porsche 935, so it was the same specification stuff, the Recaro seat of the time. This is parts for the truck, which don't really matter here, as well as a dashboard, which I just filled up in the side, to have a better side inside the windshield. And then I have to study the documentation. There is some metal pin from the motor side, probably the exhaust, as well as he had some metal parts to build up the roll cage. Had the warning inside it to say to check the fitting on the inner roll cage, but I did it on mine, as you can see the fitting is basically perfect on this model. There is no issues with the front end, and I mounted in the most simple way ever. There is no issues at all. And yeah, that's it. As I say, this is a simple model. I really prefer when you want to go for such type of model, when they go for simple stuff instead of providing you a lot of huge inner detail that you will never see. To remember with the Lamborghini Huracan, when we were looking at the wheels they provided in the box, the brake, the clips inside the brake, the cable, the stuff. It's all a lot of stuff that you don't need. Even more when they have magnesium wheel like this that basically cover everything. I appreciate that they had quite simple. I still have to clean this part detail for the brakes, but this is something that also you can trash and take whatever you have. All we have spare parts from ordinary disc brakes that are hidden inside the magnesium wheels, so no problem in these flashes and so on. Even if you clean them after 1 hour, they will be usable, but I think it's more easy to substitute with some spare in plastic that everybody of us have around. Last detail in 3D is this nice spoiler, which is, as you can see, very well taken care, so there is no wrinkle, there is no problem on this part, and it is very simple to be applied and in position up there. That's it. As I said, I badly appreciate this type of modeling, because here you can just concentrate on the shape of the car. They were named silhouette cars, so it's very important to have the proper setup, the proper shape, the proper finishing that have to be correct for the time, correct for the age, so absolutely no candy looking. You know, I always regret when I made the candy looking, because from a modeling point of view, you are always tempted to do candy stuff looking so on, because your eye is so glossy, but it's not correct for the time. You know, I nearly ruined a Ferrari Dino 206S, which I built up in the beginning as a show-up model for my production at the time, because it became completely glossy like a candy. And the modeler told me, you know, it was very nice to see, it's so candy looking and so on. So I was in the tunnel of the candy looking, but you know, some people like it, and they are not correct anyway for this type of vehicles, if they understand it or not. So that's it, guys. My tip is, if you like the model, try contact the DDP production, even if I suspect that these models are very easy to go off of production very quickly, because the production is very few numbers. So keep in touch if there is an issue and so on from the guy, because this is absolutely a masterpiece that if you have a collection of a nice Ferrari, you absolutely need to have with you to admire every day. Stay tuned for the next video of the finished model. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.